This is the Depth Mystic Community Podcast, episode 30. With me, as always, is Jungian Depth Mystic, Zach Tollen. Hello. And we also have our promotional manager, who I don't think he's done anything this week either. But he's here. Hi, guys. You're right, I didn't do anything again. I think it must be a psychological issue, or maybe I'm just not very good at this job. Okay, well, whatever it is, we're all here. And this week, I'm pretty much throwing an episode together because the community has to continue. The community has to survive. And the main way that I know that the community is still alive is that we have our weekly episode. Whoa, as Depth Mystic, I would say, don't people normally take vacations every once in a while? Isn't it totally kind of acceptable to go on vacation sometimes? Yeah, for a normal situation, that's pretty acceptable, but this is the only way that we know the community even exists at all. And it's kind of like the heartbeat of the community is that the podcast appears every week. It's of special concern, and although taking a vacation is sometimes good, I still need to reinforce the notion that our community exists. Well, in that case, maybe we could just have a light episode where we're not really that serious. We're just sort of stopping in to say hello. That's a good idea. But I know you did have at least one idea related to who you are and why you think the way you do. Yeah, so it wasn't a complicated idea, or maybe it is complicated, but in my mind it's rather simple because I have this thing where I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know what I ought to be doing a lot of the time. Admittedly, I've become a depth mystic over the course of my life, which is the word I use to describe myself, but what does that mean? And this idea is a way of describing what that means. And it divides people into at least three categories. The first category is people who are trying to succeed in the world, but not necessarily succeeding. The thing is, they know what they're trying to do. They have a concept of what constitutes a successful person. And they're merely not achieving that. And maybe they will eventually. And so the second category is people who are achieving the concept they have of success. These are like the winners of the race, which would make the first category the losers. And it's all fine if life is that simple. There's winners and losers. People who are good at the things people need to be good at in order to win. And people who are not good at those things. The third category is people who are wondering what the meaning of life is. They're wondering whether or not the thing that you're supposed to be good at is really the thing you're supposed to be good at. They're asking why. This is the category that I put myself in. It's where I fell into when I was 15 years old. And I have to say, I don't know whether I would be a winner or a loser if I never fell into this vortex in which I'm wondering what is the meaning of life? What is it all for? Why do it in the first place? Because once I started asking, why do it in the first place? I no longer was able to invest my full energy in trying to do the thing. Anybody who's asking, why should we be doing this thing, no longer has their full energy to devote to either winning or losing. They are questioning the game. And I guess there's all sorts of ways to question the game. But once you're in that state where you're questioning the game, I guess you could call it an existential crisis. And I don't know what % of people actually fall into this third category, where more of their energy is invested in questioning what it's all for than in trying to succeed. You know, I think of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, who's wondering to be or not to be. That is the question. And his whole character is defined by his uncertainty as to whether he should be playing the game or not, which is kind of why he plays it so badly. He might have played the game a lot better and become king and overthrew his uncle more successfully if he wanted to play the game. But because he's questioning, he's deprived of that energy, and it ends in disaster. So that's the third category, is people who are questioning. And as I said, I don't know what % of people are even questioning things, because I've been in this category for so long, it's hard for me to imagine not being someone who is wondering if the game people are playing is the game they ought to be playing. Now, ideally, I would finally arrive at an answer. I should come up with my own game. I would say, no, this isn't the game that people should be playing, but here is the game. I can tell people or myself what game I ought to be playing, and then I can engage in that. And then I would return to category 1, presumably. But it would be a different game. And then it would be a matter of what is the social consensus on what game anybody ought to be playing. If everybody can choose their own game, then is there any way you can be cool? Like, how do you be cool when nobody agrees on what it is that you have to do in order to be cool? And if you have your own opinion of what constitutes being cool, are you actually cool? Or do you need other people to agree that that makes you cool in order to be cool? Is being cool being perceived as cool by other people? Or can you be cool unto yourself even if everybody else thinks you're a total loser? Okay, wow. Jungian depth mystic Zach Tollen. It's almost like you had a lot of those thoughts built up already, and you just unloaded a whole ton of them at once. Maybe so. But anyway, I am in this third category. I mean, at first, when I didn't know what the meaning of life was, I was kind of ashamed of that fact. I felt like it was wrong to be in this third category. It was wrong to be questioning whether the system is the one you ought to be participating in. But as time went by, I realized there's a lot of people who have this experience. And so I felt like, okay, I'm in the group of people who have had that experience, and I didn't feel quite as ashamed of myself. But still, it's never going to be satisfying until you can arrive at your own idea of what game you ought to be playing. And then it still might be satisfying because you might start playing that game and you might lose. You might be a loser even at the game you consent to. It is possible. But that is also why our community is so hard to grow. And why our philosophy is so hard to articulate. Because once you step outside of the basic game that it appears people ought to be playing, and you start wondering, is this the right game or not? Then there's 100 million possible games that could be the right one. And that's the situation we're in here at the Depth Mystic Community Podcast. I mean, that is what makes it so hard. Because once you're questioning what constitutes a good life, then there's no obvious thing you ought to be doing in order to achieve it. That's part of why the community is such a big deal, is that it has to be acceptable to not know. But at the same time, only the community that really knows what's going on is going to be popular. Yep, that sounds good. Do you have anything else to say, Jungian depth mystic Zach Tollen? Nope. That's it. Well, okay. That's been episode 30. We got it done, and our community still exists. We will see you next week.